Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Strategy Show presented by none other than No House Advantage. I'm Dave Loughran. Joining me today, not Josh Engelman. Josh Engelman is dealing with a family matter, a family issue. So show your boy some love over there on the Twitters. Hit him up, even if you think that sometimes he's just an asshole, which we all know he is. Hit him up, show him some love. Be the bigger person around these ways. I'm joined by Greg Ehrenberg on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS. Couldn't find a better replacement for this show than Greg. Fella knows his stuff. We're here to break down game one of the Atlanta Hawks and Milwaukee Bucks, which to me, Greg, is always fun because once we get past the game one and game two, it starts to, I don't want to say get monotonous because injuries can happen, rotations can change, but this is a fresh series for the first time in a while.
Yeah, and it does get monotonous if we're being honest. I mean, I know that a lot of these series, when I'm doing, like last night when I was doing projections for Clippers Suns, trying to figure out the minutes, a lot of them just copying and pasting minutes over from the game before and be like, this is what I expect for the next game. But, for today, we're going to have a lot of stuff up in the air. Cam Reddish, he's been out for basically the entire postseason. He might be playing today. We've got Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's had a wonky knee. Right. We don't know if he's going to play or not. If he does play, how healthy is he going to look? How many minutes is he going to be allowed to play? So, yeah, there are definitely some things we have to look at and actually try to figure out today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reddish hasn't just been out for the postseason. He's been out for 4+ months. Like it's a long time to not play basketball. So not only do you have to figure out, what his status looks like, but then if he plays, how many minutes is he going to get? I can't imagine, and we'll dive into all of this, but I can't imagine that he's going to play many minutes in his return from a 4+ month hiatus.
No, I do have him in right now, but I only gave him 10 minutes. And, I assume it's also a thing where he's probably actually more likely to sit than play. But then if he's in, I think we're going to get a pretty hard minutes cap, or we're going to see beat reporters say like, hey, 10 to 12 minutes from Cam Reddish or something like that. Kind of akin to what we saw with Will Barton in the Nuggets series when he returned. So I don't think he's going to be a factor in terms of himself being a fantasy play. However, if he's going to play 10 to 12 minutes, we figure out where those minutes are coming from.
So as we usually do here on the strategy show, we enjoy recapping what we've seen the previous days. Unfortunately for you guys, there's no 76ers that I can rail on and try and provide some entertainment early in the morning. But we did have a great game yesterday between the Clippers and the Phoenix Suns. Personally, I was pulling for the Clippers. I was pulling for you, Jordan Klein, hoping that you'd get your win, and it was close. I'll tell you, Paul George, he didn't get that ball off in time, so I'm not going to act like, oh my God, if that went in. But I couldn't believe that with a body right next to him that he could turn around and actually get that close to the basket. But anyway, hit that thumbs up if you're just jumping in. We appreciate all of the support here. It helps us keep doing what we do. Keep the lights on at Awesemo. when you support us. If you hit that thumbs up, subscribe, we can keep putting out free content. Hopefully you've enjoyed it along the way. And of course, if you want to join the channel, you get the badges, you get the emojis, the custom emojis down there, only available to those here on the Awesemo team. And of course, try and get you priority access to all questions whenever we do them as well, particularly on Live Before Lock and more pressing shows without much of a shelf life. So, Greg, last night's game, Suns pull it off 104-103. They're up 2-0 in the series. One might say that's exactly where the Clippers want them.
Well, listen, I've backed the Suns basically the entire season. I bet the Suns to win the championship before the season started when they first got Chris Paul. So I have so much money invested in the Suns at this point, also because I've been betting them throughout the year. So I have the Suns at 50-1 to win the championship, 30-1, 23-1 to win the Western Conference. I have them at 36-1. I have them at 13-1. I have them at 9-1. So this is also where I would like the Clippers to be. I know the Clippers have come back from other 2-0 holes this series, but I still want the team that I'm backing to ultimately end up winning. But another talking point, a little bit different from last night. What do you make of the out of bounds rule and how it gets handled and reviewed at the end of games? Because I would like that to be changed.
How would you like to see it changed? Let's start there.
All right. So I put up, it was something I tweeted about a long time ago and I retweeted it this morning. But so basically when you are taking shot attempts, the hand is considered part of your ball. And so if you take a shot, if somebody makes contact with your fingers or whatever, right, that's not a foul. It's just considered part of the ball. Where it is considered a foul is if you make contact with somebody's wrist. So I think the same logic should be applied to out of bounds plays. So if the ball's knocked out of your hand, a part of your body other than your hand or fingertips has to touch the ball for it to warrant a change of possession.
Okay. So do you think this is something? So, okay, hold on. Let back up a second. Something other than your hands or fingertips.
So off the offensive, from the offense. So if the offensive player has the ball, so like last night, right? Patrick Beverley knocks the ball out of Devin Booker's hand, but Devin Booker, technically by the rule, it is off on Devin Booker because the last person to make contact with it was the ball went off of Devin Booker's fingertips. So to me, I would be saying that since it hit off his fingertips and not another part of his body, that would still remain Suns' possession if that follows.
Really? I don't know if I'm with you on that. So you're saying if somebody, okay, let me provide a different example. Say you're pulling a TJ McConnell and you're cutting baseline right behind the net, and a defender kind of rubs you off the ball, and as you're stepping out of bounds, your fingertips are the last ones to touch it, and the ball goes out of bounds. Are you suggesting that should still be your ball?
Well, is TJ McConnell the player who had possession of the ball was passed to him?
TJ McConnell had possession of the ball, cutting baseline, or not cutting, I'm sorry, dribbling baseline under the basket, typical TJ McConnell, and just good defense, rubs him out, and TJ McConnell loses possession of the ball, but it goes off his hands. Now, are you saying if another hand were to touch his hand and the ball goes out of bounds, it should still be his ball?
Yes, because the ball was still directed out of bounds by the defender.
So, okay. So essentially the defender in some way has to direct it out of bounds, but doesn't that create a bit of a gray area? Don't we get into some trouble there?
Not at all, because it's pretty clear, because you have to find a wording for it that's clear, because I think all of us know the overall feeling for what the rule is supposed to be. So last night, everybody recognizes what the rule is, sees the replay, and says that is going to be ruled off of Devin Booker. But nobody actually thinks that should be off of Devin Booker, unless you disagree and you think that should be off of Devin Booker.
I just think it makes it difficult in that sense, because could you not just attribute it to good defense in many different situations?
No, because the ball was still knocked out of bounds by Patrick Beverley. Just the last person to actually make any sort of contact with the ball was Devin Booker. But if that play gets reviewed throughout the course of the entire game, it's going to be off the offensive player nearly 100% of the time. So that's why it should always be, to me, whoever applies the force to the ball that knocks that out of bounds, that is the person that it's ultimately out of bounds on. It doesn't matter whose fingertips it went off last. So that's why I think the verbiage of the rule would have to be that if the offensive player has possession, it has to hit off a part of their body that isn't their hand or their fingertips.
What's the advantage to changing that rule when it's not something that benefits either team on a, skewed like in any skewed way? It's just going to affect them equally.
Because it's called differently for the first 46 minutes of the game than it is the last 2 minutes of the game.
Because of the reviews?
Because of the reviews, exactly. So any other time that ball gets knocked out of bounds in the first 46 minutes of the game, that's off Patrick Beverley all day. But because it's the last 2 minutes where we could look at it, we could review it in slow motion, we could say, oh, technically, the last person to make contact with the ball was Devin Booker. And it's just not consistent with how basketball is called for the first 46 minutes of the game. And then we just have these replay reviews that take forever because they're trying to slow-mo, they're trying to zoom in to try to figure out exactly who it went off of last, where I think that this kind of change in the rule would just be more in the spirit of what we expect from basketball.
If you can cut down the time it takes to conduct a review, then I'm fine with it, because I hate the amount of time that some of these reviews take, man. They're brutal. They really are, especially some of these flagrant calls. Some of these flagrant calls, they review them for 15 minutes when it's like, all right, you want to give them a flagrant one, just do it. That's fine with me. Normally it's just a common foul and you go about your business. But yeah, some of these reviews take way too long late in games. And Greg, I know they're trying to get them right. I understand that they're trying to get these calls right, but it really takes away from the game. Now I'll ask you one that Josh and I discussed before we get into this. We got Atlanta and Milwaukee to talk about. Welcome to all of you that are just jumping in. The one, if I could change one rule, and I promise you this has nothing to do with Ben Simmons. It really doesn't, because I give credit to Nate McMillan and the Hawks for being able to do, even though it was pretty simple. It didn't take a rocket. It didn't take a scientist to understand that hacking Ben was the play. But in terms of the overall integrity of the game and the viewing experience of a basketball game, the whole hacking rule, it really takes away from the quality of a game.
The one I thought was funniest about the Hawks intentionally fouling Ben Simmons was there was one where Kevin Huerter was just signaling to the ref, hey, I'm fouling him. And the ref was telling him, well, you actually have to foul him. You can't just tell me you're fouling him. And there was this weird kind of pause in the action where you had to foul Ben Simmons harder to where it was an actual foul for the play to stop. But actually, I don't mind the hacking thing. To me, it's fair game as a strategy, and make your free throws. Because the other thing also, if you make free throws even 60% of the time,
they stop doing it.
It's a bad play by the defense if you can make even 60% of your free throws. The fact that Ben Simmons had the worst free throw shooting series in the history of the league, that's what made it a viable strategy. But it's a bad strategy almost every time.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not something that you see employed a ton because of that exact reason. I'm just saying from a viewing experience, right? From a fan experience, it sucks. I'm not saying it's not a workable strategy in the right situation, but you're right about one thing. When you look at these games, right, say 30 seconds left, teams need to foul, send them to the line, keep it within a possession or two. You don't even have to foul anymore. Like, you just have to brush up against them, and the ref in most cases is already blowing the whistle. It is kind of egregious because there are times where the ball handler slips the defender's reach and he gets his fingertips on him and they call a foul, when in no other aspect, not the other 47 and a half minutes of that game, that would never be called a foul. And they probably could have ran the clock out.
Yeah. And then, by the way, I'm just looking up right now. So Ben Simmons, if he just shot what he shot from the line for the season, he shot 61%. So, that would be, if he goes to the line on 100% of possessions, more often than not, that's actually a good offensive possession. Because for the season, Philadelphia had a 110.8 offensive rating. So that means if Simmons was able to go to the line and make 56% of his free throws, then there's no reason for the Hawks to do it. It's a really low bar to set, but he was just not able. He was not able to do it in the postseason.
He's a head case, is what he is. It's unfortunate, but that's Ben Simmons for you. Anyway, last thing though, with the Suns, do you think Kawhi Leonard returns in any capacity in this series? And if he does, are we going to see another Anthony Davis situation, a Mike Conley situation, a James Harden situation? Because at this rate, the Clippers have never, I don't think they've ever been to an Eastern Conference or Western Conference Finals game. I don't even think they've been to the Western Conference Finals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they have.
No, they have not been to the Western Conference Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals, neither for the
Eastern Conference Finals. That's the one that surprises me. But Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, they're going to have to try something here, and they came close. I know, of course, you are invested in the Suns, but do you think Kawhi Leonard plays at all?
No, I assumed that he had a torn ACL, and they've been
Me
really
too.
sketchy with the kind of information they put out. Because when he first got hurt, they had said so. A couple of things here is first they had said that they feared it was an ACL injury, which is almost never good news. And then we usually find out a day or two later what the actual injury is. And then they said that, hey, we're not able to do an MRI. We're not able to do imaging because there's too much swelling there. We have to wait for the swelling to go down. We saw something similar when Klay Thompson tore his ACL. They said, we fear it's an ACL injury, but there's a lot of swelling. We can't do an MRI. They just did the MRI 2 days later and revealed the results. And then even the other day when the Clippers came back to beat the Jazz in game 6 and clinched that series, they're interviewing Paul George after the game. And they said, like, hey, any status updates on Kawhi Leonard? What did it mean to not have him out there? What could it mean to potentially get him back? And Paul George said, Kawhi Leonard has carried this team to this point in the season. I look forward to carrying the team the rest of the way to the championship. And to me, that just indicated that he already assumed that Kawhi Leonard was out for the season. So to me, I feel like there's information that's known that they have not told the public yet for whatever reason. But it's like Kawhi isn't even with the team right now. So I assume that he's a fairly significant injury, unless I'm just reading this wrong. But yeah, I would be really surprised if he plays again.
I did see a report where they said that they feared it was an ACL injury. It seemed very vague, so it was tough for me to get a good read one way or the other. But I also saw a knee sprain last night. He's out with a knee sprain. So,
but by the way, a torn ACL is a sprained knee. It's so any sprained knee, it just means a damage to the ligaments. But so all ACL tears are a sprained knee, but not all sprained knees are torn ACLs. So we see all the time a team will diagnose a player with a sprained knee, and then it ultimately ends up being a torn ACL. So just because it's a sprained knee, it doesn't mean it isn't a torn ACL.
Fair enough. It seems like they've waited a while for this, and I'm not necessarily sure what the play. Like, I'm not sure if you're trying to slow play this, with the Suns game planning for Kawhi, because at this point, my assumption is they aren't. But the worst part about a torn ACL, the very worst part, would be that it's squander. Your playoff run goes up in smoke, and now Kawhi's out for part of the regular season next year. And that's just the worst part of all of this. Like, you can't even make that up.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is they don't have control of their draft for the next, 5 years. So, I mean, if there's actually a situation where Kawhi's out for an extended period of time, who comes out looking really good is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who already have 1 million draft picks, and then they're going to have rights to their draft next year. They're going to have rights to the Clippers draft next year. And then maybe Houston's also, I forget exactly what all their draft pick situations are, but I mean, that's a team that's just so loaded with assets. And then one more thing before we start, I mean, we have, little bit of time. We have to talk about the one game, but what did you make of the Spencer Dinwiddie thing with the ACL too? I mean, they say he's 100% ready to play after just 5 months after surgery.
Good for him, man. That's awesome. Well, let me take a Greg Ehrenberg approach on this. I just call that skill. I mean, they're skilled enough to come back in 5 months. No, I think different players are built differently. Do you remember? You want to talk about an absolute freak of nature, athletically and physically, Adrian Peterson. I'll never forget when you've played season-long fantasy football all your life, right? Okay. I'll never forget when Adrian Peterson was going in the 4th round, coming off that late season ACL tear. I think it happened in week 15 against Cleveland. It happened in week 15 or late in the season. And everyone, mind you, this was the consensus number 1 overall pick for several years prior to that, every single season, right? And then Adrian Peterson comes back, and everyone's thinking, man, I don't know if I can go AP here. This is or AD here. This is tough. So he goes late 3rd, early 4th. I scoop him up in the 4th round. He has a 2,000-yard season, didn't miss a game coming back from a late season ATL tear, and racked up 2,000 rushing yards in his first season back. To me, there are certain players that just repair their bodies repair. They heal quicker than others. And maybe Dinwiddie's that guy, or maybe he's got trainers and a medical staff that are just on some voodoo shit or some cutting edge type of treatment that we have no idea about. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't think it's possible, because Adrian Peterson's done it. And we've seen a couple players heal really quickly from those type of injuries.
And also, these injuries are going to constantly be changing because of advances in science. So
that's what I'm saying. He might just have some cutting edge medical treatment. Yeah.
So even look at like Kevin Durant. If he tears his Achilles even 3 years ago, I doubt that he's the same player that he is right now. But just because of so many of the advancements that we've made recently, so even that's one of the other things that I think applies to the Spencer Dinwiddie thing is that I don't think the torn ACLs are necessarily season-ending injuries anymore. I did a radio show. I was a guest on Robert Clapper, who has a show on ESPN LA. He's an orthopedic surgeon that talks about injuries in sports and how they apply to fantasy sports and players' values and whatnot. And I was on his show and we were talking about some of these injuries off the air. And he had told me, and this was 2 years ago, he said in less than 10 years, he said torn ACLs, surgery for that is going to be a week-to-week injury. He said torn Achilles is something that won't be season-ending. And I thought that seemed really ridiculous at the time. But here, just a couple of years later, Kevin Durant has already come back 100%, which was something that was impossible at that point in time. So, I mean, that's where it looks like we're trending, especially when we get news that Spencer Dinwiddie is 100% after just 5 months after ACL surgery.
Well, that would be insane if that's the case, because at this rate, it's like broken hips and broken femurs are going to be the only thing that put you out for the year. That's nuts. I'm not going to act like I know anything about it. I don't. But if that's the case, then yeah, the advancements are so intense that I wish Jamal Charles was playing in this day and age, because he might go down as the best running back ever. Yeah, I said it. Last thing, where are you? Nicholas says Adrian Peterson is special and comparing other athletes to his situation is not fair at all. No, it's totally fair. You're missing what I'm saying. I'm saying there are certain athletes like Adrian Peterson who are able to recover quickly or quicker from injuries. We haven't, like, maybe Spencer Dinwiddie just, had enough Bitcoin to go out and pay a really, really, really great doctor or rehab physical therapist. I don't know, but yeah, it's possible. Yeah, Tommy, Jamal Charles, just the absolute GOAT. Love that guy. All right, let's talk about Atlanta, Milwaukee. Before we do, say what's up to our sponsor, No House Advantage. You guys know this already, but we've got a ton of reasons to play over there. The first thing, number one, it's a peer-to-peer player prop platform. It's like any other tournament, right? GPP style. You set your lineup, you build your lineup with the players that you like, but instead of a salary cap, instead of them having salaries, you're using player props, the over, under, whether you want to do points, rebounds, assists, whatever it is. It's very cool. The ones you like the most confident in go at the top. They get the most points. The ones you're least confident in go at the bottom. They get the fewest points. So if you don't hit on them, kind of is what it is. But obviously the goal is to hit on all of them and win money in these guaranteed tournaments. Now, the best part, we have tools over at Awesemo.com entirely free, 24/7, 365 days a year. The Awesemo No House Advantage player prop tool, the Awesemo Optimal Lineups tool for No House Advantage, all of that is free. And when you sign up there at No House Advantage, going on the app, download it in the App Store, Google Play, go to nohouseadvantage.com, get $20 deposit bonus when you sign up and deposit using the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. And the last thing I'll say, probably the most important thing outside of all of that, these props are static. They don't change throughout the day. So if big news comes out or if a line moves based on the amount of money coming in on one side or the other on another book, it doesn't change at No House Advantage. Plenty of ways to find an edge, take advantage, and really build up a bankroll over there. Even if you want to go chase 100K prizes elsewhere, great spot to build your bankroll up. No House Advantage. Check that out and use the promo code Awesemo to get your deposit bonus. Whew. All right, Greg, let's talk about this one. Atlanta and Milwaukee. First things first, captain spot. Giannis Antetokounmpo is getting about 33% in the captain spot on DraftKings, on FanDuel, 73%, 99.9% total ownership there, 95.4% on DraftKings. It's really not worth arguing against Giannis Antetokounmpo in a spot like this, in a showdown slate.
Yeah, especially not for this particular game, right? Because when we had at least the Bucks playing the Nets, you could make a reasonable argument that, hey, I think Durant should have a higher projection than Giannis. I think Giannis should have a higher projection than Durant. There is no comparable player here. I have Giannis projected for over 15 more fantasy points than Trae Young, who's the next top scorer in the game. So there's such a big drop off from Giannis to everybody else. Here's what the issue becomes, though. If you were playing a bunch of lineups in whether the single game tournament on FanDuel or showdown contest on DraftKings, if you're going very heavy with Giannis as captain, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're not going to win because, that's something that could happen in single game contests, or you're going to win and you're going to split the prize pool with a million other people. So the question becomes then, to me, if you're playing Giannis at captain, in what ways could you differentiate it all? Because I agree he is the best captain play for somebody who plays cash games on one game slates. You want to have him in the captain / MVP spot. Frankly, on FanDuel, I think he has to be in the MVP spot. I don't see any way around it. But DraftKings, there is more of a discussion, and then it's trying to figure out lineups that do have Giannis. How do we differentiate?
You know, really fascinates me today, and we're going to jump around a little bit, just hit on the most important spots, get into some strategy. I'm really interested in Clint Capela, and I'll tell you why. If you were to ask for, the worst possible matchup for Capela, Joel Embiid and the Sixers are one of them, and it showed. It's a very tough rebounding matchup. All of his buckets were just straight like alley-oops and maybe a couple putbacks. As the roll man, I think he got maybe one a game. I was watching Capela very closely, and there just wasn't anything he did as far as being truly involved. Now, granted, that's kind of what Capela does, but the rebounding, the stocks upside, it just wasn't there. He averages two blocks per game in the regular season, and he was nowhere close to that in this series. There just wasn't a lot working for him. Embiid ate him up on many occasions and also made it more difficult because as a guy that's used to defending close to the basket, Embiid can pull you out 15 feet and hit a fadeaway jump shot that no one can really defend. So I think Capela is at least an interesting talking point today, Greg, given that he's going into a matchup that may not be great, and I don't think Brook Lopez gets the credit that he deserves in many cases, but I think it's better than it was against the 76ers. And if there was ever some really, really sour sentiment on a player, it would be on Capela after those 7 games against Philly.
Yeah, so the one issue, though, here with Clint Capela is that he's also priced much differently in this game than he was in those games against the 76ers. So, we saw a bunch of games where in some of the DraftKings contests where Clint Capela was priced in, the 7,000 range. Now on DraftKings, he's priced up to 8,600. So while I do agree this is a better matchup, it seems like it's built into the pricing algorithm. So in the morning when I'm ever getting prepared for strategy shows, I don't know what my final build is going to be. I always build lineups just to kind of get a sense for how am I going to be comparing to the field. And I'm right around even with the field on Clint Capela. So right now we have him for 30% ownership right around overall. And that's right where I'm at too. So to me, he just kind of looks like a neutral play.
Does Trae Young give you any confidence in the captain spot today, coming off a really ugly game 7, 5 for 23 shooting, where Kevin Huerter was the Hawks savior, but also someone that has elite assist upside, decent ball swiping ability, not a good rebounder, but can piece together some really, really big points, assist, doubles with a few steals along the way. He's played 40 plus minutes in 4 straight games, closing out that series. We talk a lot about Giannis and how he is the best captain play for sure, but I'm interested in your thoughts on Trae, not because I don't think you can make an argument for captain spot, but because his price is so close to Giannis that it makes it really tough, although it makes it really different given that he's only projected for 9% at captain.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say about Trae Young. If you're just building lineups based on projections, you're not going to get to a lot of Trae Young. However, we do have Giannis projected for about 4x the ownership in the captain spot. Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday are also more popular options in the captain spot. I think that Trae Young deserves to be the second most popular captain in this play and not the 4th most. So I think he warrants more than 9% ownership. It's not to say that it's not to say that he's a better option than Giannis or anything. It's just he's probably going a little bit under-owned in that spot. The other thing to consider too, if Trae Young doesn't play well today, the Hawks probably get smashed here. I understand that they were able to play competitively against the Sixers when Trae Young didn't play well, but I mean, they got an absolute ceiling game from Kevin Huerter that night, like you said. And then also Joel Embiid didn't play well. Ben Simmons didn't play well. Tobias Harris was okay, but the Sixers really sucked on the other side. And I think the Bucks are a much better team than the Philadelphia 76ers. No offense, Laffy, but with that in mind,
I said they were too. I said the Bucks should beat the Sixers pretty easily if the Sixers were to advance. So I'm at least objective.
And the other point here is just I don't see a way that this game stays competitive unless Trae Young plays well. So that also adds like a weird dynamic to some of the strategy and the ways about going about building lineups. Because if Trae Young doesn't play well, I think we're probably seeing backups for most of the 4th quarter.
Really?
Yeah, I think the back end of the 4th quarter. This is a game that right now has a spread of 8 points. And if Trae Young plays poorly, then yeah, I think the Bucks are probably up by like 15 to 20 points, and we're seeing guys like Axel Tupain or whatever on the court at the end of the 4th quarter.
I don't know if you're betting sides on this, but Are you laying the points with Milwaukee?
I am not. I considered it when the line first opened, just for the fact that it opened at Bucks -7 was the number. And I thought it was interesting that the number actually opened for game one lower than what it opened for game 7, Sixers versus Hawks. So game 7 opened up Sixers -7.5. And then game 1 of this series opened Bucks -7. And just based on a comparison, I felt like, well, I think the Bucks are better than the 76ers. So that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it wasn't a number I was willing to bet. And it has since moved to 8.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one because I'm assuming that it's hard to set a line on this Hawks team right now because every single game it was just, the wrong is the wrong way to put it, because I'm assuming you got pretty equal action on each side of that one, putting the Sixers at 7. But I mean, just Hawks outright winners in Philadelphia in game 7. It's tough, man. I don't feel comfortable with the 8. And I guess the thing here, though, is when you actually think about it, I think you're right. Not only are the Bucks better than the Hawks, but look at the way in which the Hawks won a lot of these games. I mean, Kevin Huerter was the savior last game. Normally, if Trae Young shoots 5 for 23, any other team that's half decent should handle them, right? Like, just absolutely handle them. That wasn't the case. You had Danilo Gallinari in one game where they're down by 26, bring them back. Trae had some flashes for sure, and he had a bunch of decent games. But, like, are we going into this game under the assumption that like Kevin Huerter can be the hero again if Trae Young doesn't play well, or Danilo Gallinari off the bench can be that guy? Because Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's a game time decision, clearly isn't at full strength. It's very obvious at this point. Clint Capela is not going to win you games on his own. And John Collins, sure, gets some opportunities, had some big dunks, which are flashy, but they're not really game-changing outside of someone that believes in momentum shifts. I don't really think they have the surrounding cast here, and I think that speaks a lot to what you were saying as well.
Yeah, and maybe this isn't fair to the Hawks, but from that, and also this is totally based on what the narratives are also, I thought the Hawks beating the 76ers in game 7 said more about Philadelphia than it did about Atlanta.
Of course.
And that's also been, nobody's talking about right now. Nobody's talked about the last couple of days how good the Hawks were, how good Trae Young was. There was some like Kevin Huerter memes and stuff like that. But there's nobody who talked about, who was pumping up the Hawks. A lot of it was, look how much Ben Simmons sucks. And that's what all the jokes are about. So I don't want to say the Hawks are a bad team or anything like that, but I still don't think this is a particularly good team. And I think the reason that they won last series was just because the 76ers didn't show up. Ben Simmons had a mental meltdown. Joel Embiid, whether it was because he was not healthy or maybe just wasn't totally 100% fit, but it looked like he kind of struggled handling a playoff workload because he really faded in the second half of a lot of those games. So, I mean, my takeaway from that series, and by the way, I was really heavy betting the 76ers in that series, and I didn't come away thinking anything other than the 76ers are not nearly as good as I thought they were.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, and of course, Ben Simmons is just a liability at this rate. But are you talking about the one meme with DJ Qualls? The what?
Wait, what?
You didn't see that Kevin Huerter meme? It's like when Kevin Huerter gets back to Atlanta. I'll have to show you.
No. Oh, I did. Okay. Yeah. I forgot the actor's name is DJ Qualls, but yeah. So that
one
was
new
funny.
Guy.
Yeah. That one, I think I retweeted that actually, but yeah. So that one was funny. I just didn't remember his name, but yeah, now you mentioned it and you explained it. The other one was also the, what's the guy's name? Rick Ash, the guy Never Gonna Pick You Up, Rick Astley. Yeah, so there was another one too where where Kevin Huerter is making the shots over Seth Curry, and then it turns into Rick Astley singing the "Never Gonna Pick You Up, Never Gonna Put You Down" song. So yeah, that was the one I thought was the best.
If Atlanta wins this series, I'll take back everything I said, because I've been very low on the 76ers. I've been very hard and critical of them, and I think rightfully so. But if Atlanta wins, I just can't. I can't see it happening, man. I can't see it happening. And if I'm going either side on this, I probably lay the 8 with Milwaukee, just because I don't know if Atlanta has the firepower unless Trae Young. Like, if you're not laying those points, you should be taking the over on the Trae Young points prop, because I don't really see any either. I don't see one. I don't see both of them. I don't see where Trae Young goes over on, it's possible, of course, and the rest of the team just sucks. But when Trae Young's on, he can keep a game competitive by himself. What do you do with guys like Middleton and Holiday, who kind of tough guys to talk about all throughout that Brooklyn series, particularly because you had Durant and you had Giannis, and that made things a little bit different. And then Middleton and Holiday just kind of sitting down there where they're not cheap, but they're not super pricey. They're kind of in a strange spot where if you want to captain Giannis, you're not getting Trae and either one of Middleton and Holiday. You're going to have to make some tough decisions there.
Yeah, so in my builds I made this morning, I'm overweight to the field on both Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're on an island in terms of their price point. Chris Middleton at 10,000, so that's a lot cheaper than Trae Young, and then Drew Holiday 9,400. So then you get to a point where these guys are priced, a little bit more expensive than Clint Capela or John Collins, but they should be priced way more expensive than Clint Capela and John Collins based on how I project these guys. So I think that there's more than a 10-point more than 10-point projection gap between Capela and Collins to Middleton and Drew Holiday. So before, when you'd asked about Clint Capela and the idea of, hey, if there was ever time to buy low on him, the issue I have with getting to somebody like Capela is I'd much rather pay up for Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. And then it's also a series where we might see Bobby Portis get back into the mix, right? He was somebody who played a key role for them and then just didn't down the stretch of last series because both the Nets and the Bucks played really tight rotations. I think there are a handful of cheap guys we could go to for value. So it's actually pretty viable to make stars and scrubs lineups for this.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting points about this is the Bucks were down 0-2 in the series. Now they had some, fortuitous bounces, so to speak, when it came to the Nets injuries. But you saw Budenholzer really, really, really condense that rotation as we went later on in the series towards where the end it was. Game 7, you saw Pat Connaughton play 23 minutes. The rest of the bench played 6 minutes total. 6 minutes total. That's it. And I think that's the way it should be. I mean, with the Nets played 19 total minutes off the bench. Landry Shamet, Jeff Green got 19 total minutes, nobody else. I think game 1's a little bit different, as you're saying. I absolutely think it is for a couple of reasons. One, yeah, they've had a couple of days off, but you're running these guys. Don't forget, too, that was an overtime game. Giannis played 50. Middleton played 52. These guys are playing a ton of minutes. It makes sense to kind of reinitiate or to kind of reintroduce guys like Portis back in, give Bryn Forbes a little bit more than 5 minutes. Pat Connaughton could play around 28 today, and you don't have to worry about only playing your starters for almost the entire 240 minutes of the game. So if that's the case, because we could talk about Danilo Gallinari and Brook Lopez and Collins, and maybe we'll close with that. Let's talk about a couple of these cheap options that might actually make some sense today. And Greg, the big thing too is if people are looking at last series, what's going to happen is you're going to see guys like Bobby Portis and Bryn Forbes and some of these guys get no ownership at all because they haven't been getting minutes.
Yeah, so I was looking back at last series to try to figure out what's an accurate representation of what I think the minutes are going to be for this series, because like we just said, like you said, and what I said also, towards the end of that series, it was such a tight series against the Nets. Both teams had no choice. Well, I don't want to say no choice. Budenholzer had no choice but to play starters big minutes last year, and he didn't do that. But he actually did it this year where he played his guys big minutes. So we just saw these guys all play close to 50 minutes. And if you go back to a fairly competitive game, was it game 3 against the Nets? Game finished 86-83, and we still saw big minutes go to the starters, but there was a more balanced rotation. That's what I'm looking at as more of an expectation for what we might get today. So in that game, we saw 34 minutes from Brook Lopez, then Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis. They all played over 40. I think it's reasonable to keep expecting that. But then we saw Bobby Portis played 12 minutes. Pat Connaughton played 13 minutes. Bryn Forbes played 15. I think we're going to start to see those guys play, not massive minutes, but we're going to see them play minutes in, like the 10 to 15 range. And that's going to make somebody like Bobby Portis, in my opinion, a really good value play that people just aren't going to be on. Do I know for sure he's going to be in the rotation? No, but it makes sense to me that he would be in the rotation for this game.
I'd be shocked if he wasn't. Now, I could be wrong, obviously, but I'd be very surprised if he wasn't. I think it also depends on the direction this game takes early on too. Right? If Milwaukee gets out to a big early lead, which is possible, then you probably see Budenholzer loosen up this rotation a little bit, which is going to make things interesting. Bobby Portis, Bryn Forbes. I guess too, when you talk about a guy like PJ Tucker, he's already been playing pretty big minutes, but do we see his playing time go back into the high 20s instead of the mid to high 30s?
So here's something I'm struggling with PJ Tucker.
He sucks.
Listen, I'm a big PJ Tucker fan, and he was a big part of last series. He played really good defense. But
I'm talking about for fantasy.
For fantasy, for fantasy, he definitely sucks.
There's a reason he always has a spot in the rotation. He's just not good for fantasy.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure he's going to start tonight though, and it's not something that I have a massive edge on by predicting ahead of time, because it's a 1-game slate. Everybody's going to know ahead of time if he isn't starting, but he didn't start in the first series of the postseason. The reason he started in the series against the Nets was to match up against Kevin Durant. I don't know that there's that much incentive to start PJ Tucker and play him as many minutes in this series. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see Pat Connaughton back in the starting lineup again, which then has to, change how we view guys like Bryn Forbes and PJ Tucker himself, because that would make us think there's more small ball lineups coming for the Bucks. Yeah, I'm not positive that PJ Tucker starts, so I think there's potential for the Bucks to change the starting lineup.
Okay. Now, if that's the case, I mean, Connaughton's going to get ownership regardless, right? Because people are looking back on the previous series. This is the one guy who's still dirt cheap that has been getting consistent minutes, albeit relatively unproductive minutes, but really not awful. I mean, he's had a couple games where he actually performed quite well. I think Connaughton will be, no matter what, whether he's a starter or not, he's going to be your highest owned value option, unless we get some crazy shakeup with the rotate or with the starting lineup. I don't see any way Connaughton isn't the highest owned of the value plays tonight by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, and it's for good reason, right? Because no matter what we see the Bucks do, especially if he starts, but even if he comes off the bench, his minutes from the last 4 games of the series against the Nets, 22 minutes, 32 minutes, 22 minutes, 23 minutes. His fantasy production in those games, he had 1 game where he was chalk and he really sucked and scored 2 fantasy points. But the other games, he scored 15, 21, 27 fantasy points. And I'm pretty sure he was in the optimal lineup in those 3 games just because the price point was so cheap. And considering that DraftKings has not priced him up at all from those games, he's pretty obviously the best value here. Then the question just becomes, if you're looking to pivot, where do you go to? Do you go to somebody like Bobby Portis? Because, if we gave Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton the same minutes, or at least comparable minutes, all of us would project Bobby Portis for more fantasy points than Pat Connaughton at that point. It's just, there's a lot of playing time risk and uncertainty with Bobby Portis. So to me, with Pat Connaughton, I certainly think he's a very good value play. But I'm also going to be looking to pivot off him with some of these other guys that could be re-entering the rotation.
What do you make of Onyeka Okongwu?
I mean, he's a fairly decent fantasy producer, and I think he's going to be in the rotation. I don't see any reason for that to change.
He played 15 minutes in game 7, 16.
Yeah, 16. And then even before then, he played 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes. And the funny thing is, when he's as cheap as he is, and for the season, he's a guy who averaged 10.4 fantasy points per game and 11.3 minutes. We're looking at about a fantasy point per minute in a single game contest. And also, this is going to be different DraftKings versus FanDuel. FanDuel, Okongwu is kind of irrelevant in my opinion. But for DraftKings purposes, when you have Okongwu priced at the flat min at 1,000, if he plays 7 minutes and scores 7 fantasy points, if Giannis has a big game, Trae Young, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, all the big games, you're going to need the $1,000 of salary savings anyway. So Okongwu could very well score 7-8 fantasy points and end up in the optimal lineup. So just given where he's priced at, he's for sure a strong value play.
He is. I had interest in him last time out on Sunday's showdown slate. Did it work out? No, but the process did, in the terms of he played 16 minutes. Like, I couldn't have asked for more than that. It was the most minutes he played in the entire postseason, right? I'm not saying you get that from him, but if you get 15, say you get 15, 16 from him today at that price, and it allows you to get in, it allows you to go from a $3,800 PJ Tucker to like a, I don't know, more expensive guy in the mid-range, that's all you're going to need. So I think there's a lot of value here tonight that might not be on the surface popping off the page, but definitely makes some sense. And it'll be fun to do live before a lock if we get some news on these. Even if we don't get news, that might make it even more appealing. We'll see. But let's close it out with the mid-range here. First, I want to let you guys know that we do have free content, well, premium content that we rotate through for anyone that's not a subscriber yet, maybe not in the position to do so at the time. You like watching our free stuff, but you want to check out some content, but it's behind paywall. The NBA player rankings, usually behind paywall, are free today. Same with MLB main slate ownership projections. That's huge. And the PGA Pro Plays. If you want to check out what we really have, like everything behind paywall, ownership, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, optimal lineup percentage, lineup builder, fantasy cruncher add-on, all of that stuff. And of course, all of the premium articles, go to awesemo.com/join. All of these tools built and used by the #1 ranked DFS player, Awesemo himself. He's won a lot of money using these very tools that we have on the site. And it's not just for basketball, baseball, football, hockey, MMA, UFC, NASCAR, PGA, everything. If they have contests at these sites, we've got content for it. And I'm not just talking articles like a lot of other places, like, oh, we got PGA content. Here's 3 articles. I'm talking all of the tools, ownership, top golfer tools, projections, and so much more. So check it out if you want to. You've seen the avatars at the top of the leaderboard. You've seen the awesome avatars and our Hall of Fame segment with all of the winners that we always do to try and brag for you guys. Go to awesemo.com/join. Check out the weekly, monthly. You want to make a real investment, go annual. Or hell, maybe you want to try a week out for an express pass that's less than $5 a week for NBA. All of the showdown tools, projections, ownership, you name it. All of that is included in that pass. And you've got a lot of showdown contests coming up. So go to awesemo.com/join. Check it out. And if you want to get 25% off your first week, NBA Strategy Show, all one word, caps, 25% off your first week, everything on the site. By the way, Greg, I looked at this today. It's amazing how like MLB's in full swing, but you've seen the NBA showdown contest go from 100K to first, then 105K to first, now 150K to first tonight.
And they fill early every day off the top of my head. The only time they don't fill early is if there's some sort of injury situation. People are just, hesitant to put lineups in early, which, maybe that'll be the case today because we have Bogdanovich questionable play and Reddish questionable play. But yeah, these fill fairly quickly, and there's usually second and sometimes even third iterations of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see if this one fills early tonight, but showdown basketball is no joke at this point. I wouldn't say it rivals NFL showdowns, but NFL showdowns are unique to only a couple days of the week. Whereas with this, it's every day, 100K, 150K to first. It's huge right now. And that's why you and I are still doing some basketball. That's why we still have the live before lock shows and are going to keep putting out content for it. So hopefully you guys stick around through the end of the season. And by the way, we're 16 likes away from 100. That would be much appreciated if we can get to that 100 mark before we close this one out and head you over to this MLB strategy show. All right. So we hit on the top tier guys. We hit on the value guys. What do we do with these mid-range plays like John Collins and Brooke Lopez and Kevin Herter, who really feels overpriced off of one performance, and Danilo Gallinari and Bogdanovich, who's a game time decision, but clearly hasn't looked healthy?
Yeah, I don't really like this tier very much at all. So Kevin Herter has had a couple of, Kevin Herter is back-to-back games of over 40 fantasy points. Maybe people will chase the points, but there's a couple of things here. Number one, I don't think Bogdanovich is totally healthy, but it stands to reason he might be healthier today than he was last game. So if that happens to be the case, that's already a couple of minutes to come away from Kevin Herter and also potential dip in usage. The other thing also, if Cam Reddish is going to be active and play 10 minutes, where are those minutes going to come from? Also, that could be a couple of minutes to come from Kevin Herter. So we saw in the last couple of games, Kevin Herter played not just really well when he was on the court, but he played massive minutes. The last 2 games, 44 minutes and 40 minutes for Kevin Herter. I have to think those minutes are going to take a little bit of a step back. So to me, Kevin Herter, I think ultimately is probably going to pick up ownership just based on his last couple of games. We have him projected for 20% right now. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being higher than that. So to me, Kevin Herter is a fairly weak play in the mid-range.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess the only guy, and you touched on it a little bit, but Danilo Gallinari, his minutes have kind of been strange. As a matter of fact, he's gone 30, 23, 30, 23, 30 over his last 5 games. His shot volume really hasn't been insane. He's just shot pretty well in a lot of these. And when you're shooting well from beyond the arc, decent performances are going to come with that. He's gotten to the line at a fairly respectable clip. is Danilo Gallinari priced affordable enough for you, or is this a spot where you just like the idea of going kind of, it's crazy to say it for a showdown slate, but stars and showdown slate in the Eastern Conference Finals. Is this more of a stars and scrubs look tonight?
Yeah, and the other thing also with Danilo Gallinari is he's priced higher than he's been at any other showdown contest for the season. And then also another thing, like you said, Bogdanovic could be out there. We could have Cam Reddish back in the mix. And Gallinari, for most of the season, he wasn't really good this year. And even if you look at his potential upside, those games against the 76ers, 29 fantasy points, 18, 28, 18, 21, a lot of those games aren't going to kill you, but they're not going to win you a tournament either, especially for a showdown contest. So priced up to 6,000 now, Danilo Gallinari. He's somebody else I don't really have all that much interest in. The way I really want to build lineups is pay up for Giannis, Trae Young, Middleton, Holiday, and then just take shots on some of these cheap guys. Obviously the popular ones like Pat Connaughton, but then also trying to mix in some of those other contrarian value options we mentioned. And that just kind of phases out a lot of the mid-range for me.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Hey, our buddy EMAC is in chat. Check out that spotlight pictures and top stacks for the early, main, and late slate action. It's totally free over at awesemo.com. Click that link, check it out, and all of our other free articles. All right, Greg, we went 50 minutes here on a one-game slate. It's the first game of the series. I'm very much looking forward to it. Before we head out, any props, any bets that stand out to you for tonight's game between the Hawks and the Bucks?
Let's see. Individual props. So actually, here's something that stood out to me that you had mentioned earlier, and I'm going to pull this up on my phone really quick. So there are some sports books that allow you to make same game parlays, and there are some correlations to be had there. So I think that if you're going to bet the Hawks +8, it would make sense to parlay that with Trae Young. Let me see
over
what
point.
is. Yeah, so Trae Young over 28.5 points with the Hawks +8. That is +195. That I think is sensible because there's correlation there.
No question. I wish all books would allow that. There's one specifically I know that you're referring to that allows it. I think it's a pretty damn good idea because I have a tough time believing that casual bettors are just taking them for everything they're worth, but they're probably getting a lot of deposits over there because you can do same game parlays and player prop parlays.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the screenshots on Twitter that I know that people are not really using them for any kind of correlation. They're just picking a bunch of random ones, especially when you'll see people. Here's something actually.
Real quick, the reason sites don't allow them is because you can make correlated bets, yet nobody's making correlated bets.
So here's another ways this would make sense is let's say that Bogdanovic ends up playing today, and when we suspect that maybe he's going to be restricted, it would make sense as a bet that correlates. You could go Bogdanovic under whatever his points are and then over whatever, say, Kevin Huerter's point total is, just because there's a clear correlation there. That's the way that I like to utilize the sites that allow the same game parlays.
I think, though, that's how you should use them. I don't think it's like that's how I like to use them. That's how you, I mean, seriously, right? That's why a lot of books don't allow you to do that, because you can start making things where if this happens, this is more likely to happen, and then they lose their ass. But a lot of people are just like, all right, Derrick Rose over 25 points. Give me Pat Connaughton under 2.5 assists, like just fucking ripping through them, which is fine. And you see some big wins, but that book will post like a screenshot of someone that hit a 10 prop parlay and it'll be like plus 10,000 odds. They're not posting the 800 that lost on that very same, not that one, but a 10-leg parlay on the same day. So take advantage of that. And also if you really like the Bucks, you can lay the 8 with the Bucks and you can go Trae under 28.5 points. I think the 20.5, I'd lean over on Trae over 28 points because I still think he could go for 30 and they lose. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I also find the Clint Capela rebound prop interesting. We have him at 14.35 projected. Our player prop tool is totally free over at awesemo.com. And if you go to oddshopper.com, which is a fantastic site, hopefully you guys have checked that out, totally free. You don't have to pay for a damn thing on there, where you can shop odds from across all of these books. You can set your watch list, bet tracker, type in a player's name, pull up all of his props. You can bet NFL future props and pull up all that too. So a lot of stuff there. And I got a great links to sign up and get like $500-$600 free bets on some of these books that just want people over there. But yeah, I think with Clint Capela right now, we have him about 2 rebounds projected higher than his rebound prop right now, which is kind of interesting.
And I don't have him quite at 14.3, but I only have him a little bit below that. So for me personally, that's also a number that I like the over on.
Yeah, me too. I was thinking too. I mean, you get the Bucks have done a decent job of preventing opponent rebound, their high rebound clip, but we have the expected win percentage and the expected ROI tool over at OddsShopper, which is really cool. You can just check that out. 69% expected win percentage. That's a nice number there. He's at 12.5 pretty much everywhere. And as a matter of fact, that one book that Greg and I referred to, even money on the over 12.5. So if you're looking for anything, find that one book we're referring to, right? Got a blue and white logo, might start with an F and end with an handle. Even money on over 12.5. So there you go. That's why OddsShopper is so awesome, is you can check out which ones give you the best odds every day of the week. Any other thoughts on this game before we wrap this up, Greg?
No, I think that that pretty much covers everything. I just let's go. I know they're not playing tonight, but let's go Suns. Every game the rest of the playoffs, I'm just, even when they don't play, I'm rooting for the Suns.
Okay. Kez fan says, love Laffy, but he's out of touch with fans' viewing experience. We enjoy hacking. Don't change the rule to protect millionaires who can't hit free throws. That's not what I'm trying. First of all, I'm not out of touch with the fans' viewing experience. What am I, some opulent hog that is a billionaire living in a castle? Come on, dude. I'm just like you. I'm telling you, I don't enjoy the hacking experience. I don't know. There's no way I can be out of touch with a fan viewing experience. I am a fan. So, I mean, that's just preposterous. But yeah, I don't want to protect anybody. I thought Ben Simmons should have had his face rubbed in the mud after that awful performance, but I just don't think it's good. Anyway, that'll do it for us, Greg. Remember, everyone can check out our shows, especially the ones with a shelf life like this, in our podcast platform. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you want. And if you want to win a free month of Awesemo Plus, leave a rating review. Leave your username or your Twitter name, or your email in the comments. And every Friday, we give away one free Awesemo Plus Platinum Pass if you're not in the position to sign up over at awesemo.com yet. So appreciate all you guys hanging out. It's been fun. We'll do this again tomorrow morning on the Strategy Show presented by No House Advantage.